All right, so today we are joined by Monica Seidel, the Digital Communications and Marketing Intern with Watersheds Canada. Monica is joining us to discuss techniques used by charities such as Watersheds Canada to raise their profile, bring attention to different environmental issues, and inspire action. The session will cover elements that make an effective campaign and look at the different uses of social media, video, print, and digital mediums, as well as in-person interactions. These are all interesting tools that should be considered for Envirothon students when preparing your oral presentation at a regional or a provincial event. So without much ado, I'd like to tell Monica you can take control of the computer and start your presentation.
All right. So as Allison mentioned, I'm going to be talking about what charities will do to effectively communicate with the general public and also to people who are already supporters of their organizations. So it's two different streams. And I'm also going to be looking at how you can weave education into your communications. So the outline for the presentation, we're just going to start with some introductions. So we did that a bit with the group, but just a little more about who you are and why you're interested in tuning into the webinar. And then an introduction of myself. Then I'll talk about who Watersheds Canada is, what communications are, the different elements of how to tell a story, and then go over audience and branding, and then some specific case studies to Watersheds Canada. So Allison touched on it a bit, but if you were willing in the chat just to say your demographic, so if you're from the nonprofit, if you're from a school, just general interest, and maybe a one-liner about why you were interested in listening to this webinar.
And just to wait for people to type things in, Monica, I did notice we do have at least 2 schools that responded. Central Algoma has a group of students participating, as well as St. Michael.
Oh, perfect.
And Beverly mentioned she's an educator as well.
Okay. Awesome.
We'll see who else we have joining us. So we have someone from the Oak Ridges Moraine Land Trust, which I've operating in the Oak Ridges Moraine, as well as FOCA, which is the Federation of Ontario Cottagers Association, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And does anyone want to share like a one-liner about why you were interested in tuning in today?
Well, I mentioned this on behalf of Envirothon students. A major component of Envirothon is developing an oral presentation. So refining communication skills is an important component of participating and advancing in Envirothon. But we do also have Banting Memorial High School, which is in Alliston, with their Envirothon team. And we have some volunteers for all the way up from Vancouver Island and just looking to brush up on communication skills.
That's awesome.
Oh, and we have Reforest London also joining us. They're a tree planting and education organization out of London, and they are also looking for ideas about how to better communicate with their the residents and constituents.
Perfect. So.
Oh, and the last one, just so you can see it, students from St. Michael's in particular are from their eco class are interested in tricks and tips to broaden their reach within the school.
Awesome. So if you have any other comments, you can throw them in and we'll have some designated question periods throughout this presentation, but I'll just get starting on introducing who I am. So as you saw on the title card, I do the digital communications and marketing. I also do the fundraising for Watersheds Canada. Previous to working at Watersheds Canada, I've been employed at conservation authorities, humane societies, and wildlife centers, as you can kind of tell from the photos I've picked. I have an environmental science degree from Queen's University, and it's at Queen's that I kind of discovered my passion for the environment, but I didn't really know what field I should go into within the environmental field. So if I should do policy, consulting, outreach, school didn't really help me with that. I found that once I graduated and got some contract positions, I was really able to find my passion for talking to people about the environment and also inspiring action. I've been really fortunate to be employed in my field since graduating and have a lot of jobs where I'm working directly with kids and youth. So getting them at a younger age involved in their community, looking to make individual action in their community to protect their environment and local species. I found that media is kind of a natural fit for the environmental field. Not everyone is able to go to a natural area. Maybe there's a geographic limitation, physical, maybe financial. So media is really a tool that we can use to reach everyone, as long as we are taking into a couple factors, which we'll touch on in this presentation. It's also something where people maybe necessarily don't want to go outside. Some people are averse to different climates or different animals, they're afraid of them. So this can be a nice soft introduction to the environment. So who Watersheds Canada is, basically we are an organization that works with communities, landowners, different organizations to help protect Canada's freshwater. And we've been doing that since 2002. We're based out of Perth, which is about an hour southwest from Ottawa. And we have three kind of main programs that we have developed. So the first one you're seeing on the screen is about a fish habitat restoration project. So this is a cold water creek. So we, as you can see, it's kind of open area, like it's going to be getting the direct sunlight. So what we did in this after shot, I wonder if my mouse shows up when, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but I'm just going over some of the cages and trees that we planted along the shoreline. There's also some down in the bottom right-hand corner. So we're able to work with community groups to restore these cold water creeks. So by planting different trees along the shorelines, they'll grow up, they'll provide shade to that area, and then it'll be a spawning area for the fish. So our first project is fish habitats. Next is a program called Love Your Lake. So this is where we go along different lakes and we'll assess people's properties and give them suggestions in a report of how they can make their property more environmentally friendly. So we're looking at things like, do they have a natural shoreline? What types of docks do they have? Are there lots of native species, or do we see presence of invasives? And all of these are to try and increase the health of the lake. So we want to be looking at things that affect the water quality. Is there a lot of runoff or sedimentation happening along the edge of their property? How can we help them take an individual action? And our final one is called the Natural Edge. So this one is looking at restoring properties by planting native trees, shrubs, and wildflowers. The picture you can see here was actually on an agricultural property. So in this case, we're looking at reducing the amount of runoff that goes into the water. And again, it's that individual action that we're focusing on, helping that property, which will contribute to the greater health of the water nearby. Since we're a small office here in Perth, we're just a couple of people, we do offer these programs across Canada. So we have partner organizations that help us. Our partners are right across the country. So last year we had partners in British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and also Ontario, obviously. So when we're talking about our communications, it's really important that it stays consistent. So things like our branding and our audience, and we have to be able to communicate that to our partner organizations as well, so that everything stays consistent. So the first kind of group question I have for people is just, what do you think of when you hear the word communications? You can give me a definition or an example, but I'm just wondering what you think of when I say communications.
All right, so we have some answers coming in for that. So Hannah says, outreach through newsletters, social media, and presentations. And then Becky mentioned talking to the community.
Awesome. Those are both definitely things that I'm going to touch on. So those are great answers.
Oh, okay, and we have another one in. Learning opportunities. Oh, sorry, this one's from Beverly. So learning opportunities to grow knowledge and understanding. Yeah.
For sure. One more.
And then Jeff mentions the various media to connect with stakeholders in an area.
Awesome. So I think what's really interesting about this word is it can mean so many different things, and we use it so often in our daily lives that I don't know that we necessarily break it down. So that's what I'd like to start with, is just this definition from Merriam-Webster Dictionary. So a process, communication is a process by which information is exchanged between individuals through a common system of symbols, signs, or behavior. So I've just highlighted a few different words in that definition. So the first one is process. I think that process is important because we need to be going through a certain step of actions to reach a certain end goal. So that means that when you're communicating, you need to know what your end goal is. You can't just be talking to avoid. It's not going to stick with people. So you might want to know why you're communicating. Is it to try and raise money, or is it trying to raise awareness and drive action from people? You also want to know where you're communicating, and how you're communicating is going to change on the platform. So I'm not going to say the same thing online on social media, say on Twitter, as I am if you're coming to a table at an event. So we need to know those things ahead of time before we actually do the communicating. The next word I've highlighted is exchange. So communication for me is a give and take. If I just sit and talk to someone and they're not able to give me any input back, they're going to get bored, they're going to get disengaged, and that's really not what we want in the environmental field. We want to have people feel inspired to do local action. So as a charity, at Watersheds Canada, it's really important for us to collaborate with community partners, listen to individuals like landowners, and see the problems they're facing so we can help equip them to take local action. The last word that I've highlighted here is individuals. Charities can think of themselves as kind of an individual entity, so we are the charity, but I think it's really important to try and break down issues to actually have an individual face to them. So when people see a story, they want to see the significance to them. They want to have that human interest or that human impact. And I find that people aren't just interested in a nice story. You need to connect it to them. So you can connect it to them in a variety of ways, whether that's their location, maybe an issue that they're facing. You can also target it at their demographic. So maybe it's an issue that's more for people who are older and own properties versus youth who are helping with our tree planting events. So you can target it based on their age as well. So you want to personalize your message. So we're going to start with a video, and it's going to lead us into the different elements of how to tell a story. So I'm going to start by just showing you this thumbnail. So if you were watching this on our social media or YouTube page, you would see this photo first, and that will be important in a second. So I believe, got it going.
The purpose of having a natural shoreline is to create habitat. So you're putting in native species, trees, shrubs, wildflowers, and this is great habitat for frogs, turtles, and birds all along your shoreline. A natural shoreline also has the benefit of stabilizing soil, reducing erosion, and keeping your land intact. And then finally, a natural shoreline protects water quality by filtering out any excess nutrients and toxins before they enter the waterway. For our site visits, they take place mainly throughout the summer months. So July and August is when we'll come out to see you. And that's when we talk to you about your shoreline and what you want out of it. Once we determine your site conditions, such as the soil, moisture, the soil type, and the light availability, we can then use our Natural Edge app to sit down and choose plants with you.
The group from Watersheds presented a whole long list of different plants. We took their lead, and they helped us create this, and we just opened our arms to them. It just fits, I say, with our society today and our need to care for all this.
If you want to take part in our Natural Edge program, get in touch with us, and one of our expert staff will come out to your property and guide you through creating your own planting plan. So in the end, you'll have a beautiful planting plan and a naturalized shoreline using all native trees, shrubs, and wildflowers. Thank you for taking part in our Natural Edge program and protecting Canada's freshwater shorelines.
Okay, hopefully that wasn't too laggy for anyone and you could hear the audio. So we're going to use that kind of 2-minute overview video that we would send to people that are maybe thinking about the Natural Edge for the first time. We're going to talk about the different elements of the story in that video. So we want to make sure that these elements are in the story so that people get a clear message of what's happening, what they're supposed to get out of it, and that the end call at the end of the video seems genuine and natural. It makes sense with what you've just watched. So first, we're going to start off with our context for any media piece and also an in-person interaction. So this could be your opening image in a video, something like the thumbnail that I showed you, or an opening paragraph or quote in a blog post. Oftentimes, you're also going to introduce your characters right away. So in this video, you were introduced to a title, a thumbnail, and the Natural Edge logo. And you were also introduced to your first character, who is Chloe. So that's our Natural Edge program coordinator. She is also your guide. So she's taking you through the video as a narrator, but she's also the guide in that she shows our landowner what to do, how to make a difference on her property. She introduces the context as well. So we're talking about shoreline naturalization and why it's important. You saw in the video that it provides habitat for wildlife, and you also saw sort of a pan shot of the different plants that were in the water, which would help filter out nutrients before it actually goes into the waterway. We also saw from those before photos where it was just grass to the water's edge. So we're talking about how the plants are able to reduce erosion. Chloe is personalizing the issue, and that she's brought you to a specific site, and she's going to show you how the program works. Next to be introduced is Sister Pat. So she inserts the conflict and the emotion into the story. So we see the tension with the eroding shorelines, and we see that it's a complicated issue. To think that you could try and plant that whole property on your own is very intimidating as a landowner, and people often tell us that they just don't know where to start. So we're showing that you need a guide in that issue, and the guide in this case is the Natural Edge program and staff. They show why we are able to help them, but also why we're the natural fit for it. With the lead of our staff, the beautiful shorelines are created, and as Sister Pat said in the video, it fits with our society today and our need to care for this earth. So she's giving you an emotion. Still Point is a complete example, going from the conflict of the unnaturalized shoreline to the resolution and the emotion. So we as the viewer are happy when we see those after photos. We're able to see the habitat that's created and the stability to the shoreline. We see in bloom flowers, different insects and wildlife using the shoreline, and we have a clear visual to this larger issue of deteriorating shorelines. We have a local individual example now. Next, we have a lesson in the video. So there are many lessons that you could pull from that video. I just wrote down one. So we're talking about why natural shorelines are important on an individual level. So I think a lot of us can agree that environmental issues feel so large, so intimidating, and you don't know where to start. So the Natural Edge program is nice in that it gives people on an individual level an action step, and they're empowered on their own property. So the Natural Edge guide helps our character and shows her how to resolve her conflict through an action step. Finally, Chloe provides an encouragement at the end of the video. She's asking other people to learn about the Natural Edge program and to learn more on our website. So the action step for Sister Pat was to plant along Still Point House of Prayer, but your action step as a viewer is to learn more about our program. If you did click through to our website, you would see that a lot of the same elements of the story as we just had in our video. So we have the problem right up at the top. We're talking about runoff, poor water quality. You are still the character, but now you're the one exploring our website. So you might be a property owner or a community member interested in learning about naturalized shorelines. The guide is still in the Natural Edge program and staff. So we're still going to walk you through a site visit and help you plant your property. You can also help kind of yourself, if you will, with the starter kit. So you're taking even more action by planting yourself. So planting is our action step. And then an example of encouragement on the site is to see your shoreline transformed. So this is followed by some photos at the bottom of the page that show you other shorelines that have been naturalized. So it's giving you that personalized context again. We also have ways to tell stories after the video where you could request physical materials. So we're changing the medium and we're making it maybe more accessible to people because you're able to share the guide in person, or we can give this to you at a boothing event. So we have different guides that we can give people. For our Love Your Lake program, we have personalized property reports. So once we've gone all across the lake, all the properties get their own report, so it's individualized to them, giving them different suggestions that they can make on their own property to make it more environmentally friendly. So everything from shoreline buffers, types of docks, how to create wildlife habitat. For our fish projects, we have both print guides and video protocols. So once you are interested in the project, you can actually do that on your own water body to help the fish living there. So next, when you're creating your story, you want to make sure that it's personalized and it will actually reach the people you want it to. So we're going to think about our audience. And there are so many factors that can determine your audience. I've just put in a couple here. So you're going to craft an image differently if it's electronic versus in person. If you're looking at a larger partner organization than an individual property owner, how old the person is and where they live, the number of interactions they've had with you. So I'm going to describe Watersheds Canada much differently to someone that has never heard of us before than someone who is a strong supporter, gone through all of our programs. You're also going to talk differently to someone who's internal to your organization already. So someone like a volunteer, a staff member, or someone on your board. And you're going to talk differently to a new versus returning donor. So you want to make sure when you're crafting a message that it isn't just going to everyone. You can't make a blanket statement for people, because people are going to know that it's not personalized to them. So you want to find those unique characteristics like demographics and behaviors, preferences, and then you can tailor your message. You also want to be clear about the benefits. So why are they listening to you? What will they get out of the program? How will it benefit them as an individual? So in our previous video example, the audience would probably be people that are new to our organization and the natural edge. We're probably looking at someone who's a property owner, so they're probably a bit older age-wise, and they're thinking about an action. They're maybe just dipping their toe in it, they're interested, but they don't necessarily want to commit. The video itself is online, so that's going to limit who can see it. So we want to think about how we share that product. Are we just having the video live on YouTube? Are we able to leverage other networks that we already have, like an email campaign, maybe social media, putting it on a website? That way it's reaching more people. We also want to make sure in our video that it's not just a negative video. So by that, I mean, we don't want to just make it all about the negative aspects of shoreline erosion, maybe habitat loss. We don't want it to be all negative. So we want to balance it with positive or neutral stories. So Sister Pat was a great example of being a positive example. She had this problem, but she took the action step and now she has a naturalized shoreline. By having that positive message, you're driving other people to take that same action step and lead to positive change. We want to make sure that our organization also isn't doing everything for the people. So they still, in this example, get to pick all of the plants that go on their property. They will still help with the planting. So they're still the ones leading on that action step. Oh, I didn't realize I had put it on a second slide. All right. So our methods of communication. So I'm going to start with our traditional ones. So we think of kind of paper mailouts. This is going to go to probably prospects or returning donors. You could use it to advertise an event or a fundraising campaign. Maybe you're giving them an update. But this is going to be limited to people that either you are able to find as a prospect or people who are already engaged with your organization. It's also limited to people that have a mailing address. We have in-person booths. So this is typically a newer audience. You have information constraint and location constraint in that you're only at the one place and you probably only have one table. And you're giving people a general introduction to the program. And then we have two different program administrations. So our staff doing it and then our partner organizations. So this is going to be limited to people that are in the area and also staffing and financial limitations. So if I can't get to your property, I have too many requests maybe, that could be a limiting factor. which is why we were able to create those guides that I showed you earlier that could reach people even when maybe our staff are not able to right away. In terms of our partners, as I mentioned earlier, we want to make sure branding is consistent. So that's very important for your reputation, also so that people recognize your organization and the program. For our digital, we have many different digital avenues. So typical social media, Facebook especially we use. It's great for sharing articles, launching ad campaigns, so paid advertising, and also having an event that people can kind of click and attend, remind them. It's for more of an older, 35 and up kind of aging demographic, if you will, for social media standards. Instagram, we're looking at a younger audience, and it's all about the visuals. So it can be a video or a photo, but you want to make sure it's something photogenic. So those drastic, you know, before and after are going to make something great for an Instagram campaign. Twitter is more conversational, so this is great for connecting with professionals, maybe our community partners across the country, and we're collaborating on our issues. YouTube, as we saw, longer form videos. We have vlogs. Maybe you can use it for behind the scenes. So things like tours, people that wouldn't normally get the opportunity to see the inner workings of your organization or your project, and you're able to show them that through media. Your digital newsletters, so you're looking at longer form, more informational, but you're limited to your current subscribers. You're also limited to keeping their interest. So you don't want people to unsubscribe. You don't want to have too many things in your email that are pulling people away from it. So if there are lots of different things for them to click, they're not going to make it all the way through your email, and they're also going to be pulled away and maybe get distracted and not do the one action step that you wanted. So you want to make sure that your digital newsletter is focused. Your website kind of hosts everything, but it's also often your interaction with the person for the first time. So you want to make sure it's really clear on your homepage what people should know about your organization. Are there any action steps you want them to take, like signing up for a newsletter, or maybe you know, starting in a program like in our case? Our blog, it's medium length, and this is for people that are more invested in your organization. So they're looking at current news and updates, maybe events. And finally, webinars, where you're reaching wider audiences. Teleconferencing would also go in here, and typically people who are new to the organization. So your factors, you want to know why you're reaching out to people before you do it. So you want to be specific. People will know if they're receiving a general message, so you want to custom tailor it to them. So in our case, maybe we're not sending out just information about water quality. We're sending out individual emails to lake groups or community groups that are about the issues affecting them. We also want to paint a picture by being specific. So you can use this with visuals, like before and after photos in our case, but you want to know what people should take away from your messaging. You also want to make sure you don't bury your lead. So this is the most important or interesting part of your story. And you want to pick a single theme and explain it well, being specific, rather than trying to explain lots of different things, but doing a poor job and maybe leaving people confused or just disinterested. Another specific to Watersheds Canada kind of communication tool we have is our Natural Edge app. So this is what we use with property owners and community groups when we're trying to develop a planting plan for their property. So this app is really great because it's collaborative. We're with the individual and they're able to put their input in real time. But it has a geographic barrier at the beginning because we still need to coordinate schedules and get to the person's property to create the report. We have really improved this by making it a digital thing so they can access it online and be able to do edits more quickly than us having to go back and forth for each site visit, but it still has a bit of a limitation to it. As I was mentioning earlier about branding and staying consistent, it's really important for organizations to stay consistent with their branding. So branding can be a whole bunch of things. And the photo on the screen, branding can be things like your logos. You've noticed the logos has always been the same in this slideshow along the bottom. Your text, your color. Also things like sizes of text can be part of branding. And it can also be your messaging. So how you actually craft your messaging and your communications. If you're using a similar voice or a narrative, you can still have that be consistent. And this is going to help with your reputation. So creating legitimacy around your organization. So people instantly know it's you, they instantly know it's reliable, and then they can just forget about, analyzing it and thinking, oh, was this correct or not? And then they're able to just focus on what you're actually saying. So I'm going to go through this a bit quickly. So thinking about a viral environmental marketing campaign, what makes them memorable? I have a couple of examples here. So Conservation International a little while ago had a filter on TikTok that people could use, and then I believe they every time there was a filter used, they got some money. But this is really about creating awareness where people are. So plastic pollution in our waterways is very kind of prevalent in the news right now. And so this was a creative way to reach people where they already were, which was on social media, and to bring the issue to them. Two other campaigns that I thought of was Dawn, who always has those feel-good ads on TV about how they're helping wildlife after oil spills. Or on the right here, we have a WWF campaign, which was launched on Snapchat. So really taking advantage of that feature where there's only a couple seconds and tying that to the kind of impending extinction of certain species. So taking that action of meeting people where they are and giving them an action step. If you buy Dawn, then you're helping wildlife. If you're using this filter, you're raising awareness and maybe donating some money to the organization. Another way you can do this is to make a connection for people. So water quality is obviously a big thing for Watersheds Canada. And when I say, a healthy lake or a healthy river, not all of us are going to know what that is. Maybe we don't have a lakefront property. Maybe cottages haven't been a big part of our lives. So, you have an idea of what good water quality is. But if I show you this video, you know what good water quality looks like. So this is a healthy lake with a natural shoreline. Lots of wildlife are living there. There's lots of natural vegetation living on the bottom of the floor. And it's also very clear. So it's clear looking straight ahead, but it's also clear in terms of depth. So this camera is a little bit into the water and we can still clearly see everything. This is compared to kind of typical grass to the water's edge shoreline. So we don't have a natural shoreline, much of a buffer, and you're seeing that when we put the camera down into the water, there's no natural vegetation along the bottom, and the water is very murky. So it's a very clear visual for us to help people know what a natural shoreline does to the water. Another way that we can reach people is by staying topical. So having something that relates to something that's already in the news or to a current event. Maybe it's the time of year, like when we launched our gift catalog. However you see a fit for your group, it's going to have different timelines based on what you're trying to talk about. But for us, we were trying to talk around Christmas, Hanukkah holidays. So we were having our holiday guide be around that time. Like I said, you want to give people maybe an inside look into your organization. So we don't, hang on a second. We don't need to have everyone come out to a fish restoration project, but we still want them to know what's happening, how they could do it in their own community. So we can use a short minute video to show them what we were doing when we say, in-water fish habitat restoration. What does that mean? What is a brush bundle? You can see the brush bundle is on the screen. We don't have to do any fancy narration with the video. We're just showing you that you're simply collecting brush from the forest and you're creating it into bundles. We had 12 volunteers that day, and then we're taking it out on those boats and we're able to deploy it in preset locations that will benefit different wildlife. So fish will use it, maybe turtles, any animals that need it to hide in, or they can use it for spawning. We can also use our messaging to be collaborative. So a lot of our programs, we have, like I said, program partners across the country. So we want to highlight them. We want to show that we're able to work with them and make amazing on the ground change. So by doing this, we're highlighting that we're collaborative, but also we're hopefully reaching a new audience. So we're able to connect with their followers who maybe didn't know that we were collaborating with them. Maybe didn't know we had similar projects. So we're able to get that new audience And so this is just showing you kind of our analytics. So from our Facebook page. So we're able to track that. Maybe if new people like our page, we can like the post, then we can invite them to like our page. We can also make sure that our stories have a human connection. So we can go for things like testimonials, site visits. We're bringing the larger global kind of environmental crisis, then we're narrowing it down to shorelines that are eroding, and then we're narrowing it down to an individual who made an action on their property, and they're not seeing that issue anymore. So their action step worked, and that's an encouragement for other people to do it on their property. I also just included a blog post, so you don't have to always do images, or you don't always have to do social media and videos. You can also just do a simple little blurb, but you still want to make sure that the same elements of a story are in there. So talking about the before, who's the character, what's their problem, what's the emotion there, and then how were they able to resolve it, and then give people another action step at the end. Another campaign that we had was a gift catalog. So this one was across multiple platforms. So we had it on social media, our website, our blog. We also had people who were mailing them out to our property owners. We had it online as a store, and then we also had it at events. So we're able to reach more people with this one campaign by going across platforms and meeting different demographics. So in this catalog, people were able to symbolically adopt something that related to one of our programs. Then they were receiving a thank you card and a painting that they were able to either keep themselves or gift around the holidays. So in summary, when you're trying to craft your communications, you want to remember who your audience is and what their demographics are. So how would your messaging change depending on who your audience is, maybe what time of year it is? We want to know our topic ahead of time. So what are we communicating? Is it a call to action? Is it a fundraising request? Maybe a tip for them to implement on their own property? And we also want to think about what kind of messaging it is. So is it positive message? Is it neutral? Is it all negative? How can we balance those out? When? So you want to think about if there's a natural fit for your message. Is there a time of year, or is there something already in the news that relates to your message? So for us, when we're talking about shoreline erosion, maybe we're putting out more content in the spring when Ontario is having a lot of spring flooding the past couple of years. So something where your information is going to be of higher interest. We can also look at metrics. So on our Facebook page, is there a certain time of day or a day of the week where people are reacting to our content more often? Where? So this is your medium. How and where are you reaching people? Are you excluding certain groups by only offering messaging, say, on social media? If you are, how do you make it applicable to more audiences? And how do you make it specific for them? So maybe your core message is the same, but you're adding a different testimonial, different opening paragraph to fit them where they are. We can reach people at Watersheds Canada on their properties during site visits, maybe through our partner organizations and through online and print communication. So we want to make sure that our branding stays consistent. Why? Why bother communicating at all? I'm guessing that a lot of you didn't know who Watersheds Canada was before you tuned into this webinar. And so in an online environment that's saturated, especially right now for environmental issues, how can you make sure that your organization is reaching people, capturing their attention, and connecting with you long term? So nonprofit organizations especially will want to communicate because they want people to do something to protect their environment, or maybe they want to help raise money. So Watersheds Canada, we're here raising every dollar every year from donations and grants, foundation support. So we want to communicate our programs to people in order to get support and keep our organization running. If we have all of these amazing programs and partners, but you as an individual or community have never heard of them, that doesn't do anyone any good. So we want to talk about why we're communicating, but make sure that we're not just kind of sending you all of the information at once because we're so interested and we want you to be just as interested as us. We want to make sure that it's specific to you as an individual. So maybe in our example, we want to drive individuals to have change on their properties. So they're looking to naturalize their shoreline, or maybe they want to take recommendations from those lake reports, or maybe they're trying to enhance fish habitat. So in this presentation, we've talked about communications and how to do it effectively by personalizing larger environmental issues. And you're looking at your audience and your demographics so you can tailor a message or campaign. You want to make sure that you're using your branding guidelines and that you have short, clear messaging in your piece so that people know what they should be doing, what a problem is, and they have a clear call to action. I hope that I've given you some tools so that you know how to look into a communication piece by someone else and figure out these different elements within their story. I'll help you analyze it, and then when you go to craft your own, you'll be able to pull those elements and make an effective piece. Thank you again to Allison and the Envirothon for having me on this webinar, and I think we're going to open it up for questions.
Yeah, exactly. So we have about 15, 20 minutes for questions right now. So if you have any, please send them in through the chat feature on the Zoom room. To start things off, I had a quick question about the channels you selected, because at one point you mentioned all the different types of social media. So I guess there's a lot of options available to an organization between LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Vine, if those exist. So how is there a process for selecting the channels that are most valuable to your organization?
For sure. So in the case of Watersheds, I kind of inherited the 4 that you see on the screen. I personally have a passion for video, so I have been trying to promote that more so that we have kind of videos we can share with other people. I think in general, though, as an organization or an individual, if you're trying to think about your message, you want to think about who you're trying to reach. So social media especially, I feel like is really gradated by like age and length of content. So if you're thinking about just creating an action step that people can easily share, maybe you're looking at more TikTok, Instagram. If you're looking long form, like you want people to sign a petition, you want to give informative articles or blogs, maybe you're looking more at Facebook. Twitter, if you're trying to collaborate with maybe professionals, a lot of like news people are on Twitter. So I would say it just really depends. You'd have to take a step back and think about who you're trying to reach and how you want to reach them.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Just give it another minute, see if we have any other questions from the group. Because we do have a few minutes. And I did want to clarify one point as well. You mentioned at one point prospects. And I just wanted to make sure, so prospects could account for either people you want to participate in your programs or people you're looking to fund your programs, correct?
Yes. So I think I was talking about prospects in terms of people who would be donating. So maybe people who support similar organizations, just don't know about you, you could be reaching out to them for the first time.
Let's give it another minute, see if we have any questions. Any of the Envirothon students have questions about developing presentations or content? Now's the time. And I do know we have a couple of NGOs similar to Watersheds Canada that develop restoration projects. So any of those types of questions are also quite welcome at this point. Or perhaps you had the most informative presentation, so all their questions are answered. Oh, okay. We do have a question coming in. So Watersheds Canada in particular, do you produce your own brochures and flyers, or is this something you contract outside of your organization?
So I believe they got an organization to do the branding. So throughout the presentation, you're kind of seeing like that leaf and the colors and the font. So they would do that in InDesign through Adobe software. And our own, like the content within that, we made ourselves. Since those guides and brochures have been made, everything else has been done in-house. So all of our content online, our website, blogs, videos, it's usually the larger projects that we outsource. So things like protocol videos or guides.
Now, do you do most stuff in-house for a particular reason, like it's faster, your turnaround is easier, or cost issues, or?
Usually has to do with capacity. So if we have the time or the skill to do it, sometimes it can be easier if you're able to afford it, to outsource it, and then you can just give feedback on what they've produced rather than trying to create it all by yourself. It can also be easier when you're working with a lot of partners to just have everyone send their information to them rather than you trying to like disseminate what everyone's saying to you. So I would just say that if you have the capacity and the time, that's what I find is usually the limiting factor, then there's no issue with doing it in-house.
Okay. So we did have 2 more questions coming in. I'm going to jump to Jeff's first. How do you assess effectiveness of your media contacts? And do you kind of review the effectiveness of the different channels you're using?
So I do that through analytics. So we have a couple different ways to do that. We'll look at just our general reach. So we do that quarterly, seeing how many followers we're getting. Did we get more followers at a certain time of the year or with a certain campaign? You can also use Google Analytics. So looking at how many hits you get on your website, things like that. In terms of effectiveness, I really had to just figure out what our baseline was. So if your organization is quite small, maybe getting 2 likes on a post is, your normal compared to another organization where you're looking at maybe getting thousands. So you want to make sure that you're realistic with what your goals are. And if you're not happy with where they are, thinking about how you can cross promote things. So trying maybe like it's like an A/B mailing. So maybe you're trying one group and you're mailing it out in the morning, and then another group you're sending out the same message in the afternoon or the evening, or you can try different days of the week, different platforms, just seeing what sticks for your demographic and your audience, and then making sure that you can tailor it to their interests.
So it seems like being very aware of what you're sending and when you're sending it so you can track impact is an important component.
Yes.
Okay. And then I did have one question. You mentioned at one point you work with a lot of partners, and Virginia was wondering if Carolinian Canada Coalition is one of those partners or if it's someone you've worked with in the past.
Not that I know of, but I've only been here 8 months now. So I would have to ask, that would probably be our natural edge team that they're asking about for the shoreline plantings. So it's possible, but not that I know of.
And then I just wanted to quickly jump back to the assessment piece. I meant to ask, is this something that the description we talked about was kind of on a rolling basis, assessing how effective specific pieces were? Is there an annual review of your social media and your outreach and your communications, or?
So you definitely can. So, I mean, you could have your heart set on using Instagram, but if your audience doesn't use that platform, then you might have to reassess if that's the best place to go. So we've definitely looked at that, where Instagram and Twitter, we were just not using as often, and we looked at whether that was actually affecting our reach. So by not using those platforms, did it have any impact on our audience? Because it can be quite time consuming to post all of these different pieces. You're trying to customize them for either characters or having different images and videos so that people aren't seeing the exact same content on all of the platforms. So yeah, definitely you would want to check and see if people are actually using what you're trying to put out there, or if you should be putting your effort somewhere else.
Yeah, okay. And I think we have time for another question if there are any remaining. Otherwise, this session, like I said, will be posted to our YouTube channel, and you can check it out later if you need a refresher. All right, so I'm going to say then thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Monica, for taking the time to pull together this presentation and letting us know how Watersheds Canada communicates and how we can use these lessons in other organizations and sectors. We appreciate your time, and I think this was a great opportunity for everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I think it looks like everyone, we don't have any additional questions, but if anything comes up later, please reach out to me and I can see what I can do about connecting everyone later. All right, thanks.